Man Show. I'm your host, James Renford Powell. And on this show, we primarily are talking to authors about the what, who, where, when, why, and how they got their book into print, which is hopefully help you understand the what, who, where, when, and how you can get your book into print. And we talk about the subject matter of their books. And this week is a follow-up show from last week's show. It's we just couldn't get it all taken care of in one show. My guest is Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Hi.
And we have had him on this show. He was one of the first guests with his book, The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth. And now he has a new book, For the Love of God. The first one is a best-selling book. Keith has been on the Searcher's Roadmap show and different radio shows in the Radio by Renford Network. And for the last 3 years, I believe, has been hosting the Searcher's Roadmap show and now has his own show, The Center of Light. And you can catch that show on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see a number of these shows, television shows that he's been on, and the Core Concepts series, where we invite religious and spiritual leaders to come tell us what they believe, why they believe it, and what they're doing about it. And as Dr. Phil says, how it's working out for them. And Keith has had a tremendous amount of experiences with Sai Baba and his trips to India. And this book, his latest book, is For the Love of God. I think you just saw a picture of it, For the Love of God, which is that story as to how that came about. Tell me, sometimes people talk about God telling them to do this and God telling them to do that. And some say it's like a small voice or an intuitive thing. And some say it's like literally hearing the voice. And you described a flight where Sai Baba comes and sits down and talks with you. I mean, you have different things there. When it came to writing the book, what was that like? Was that like downloading, or in this particular case, what was that like? What was the experience?
I think I've been started my downloading in '96 when the Divine Principle was being spawned. And I think that actually carried over into this experience. I think, in fact, I'm absolutely sure of it, Spirit doesn't operate on this linear timetable that we go from point A to point B, that it's all inclusive and it all happens kind of like in a circle, this multi-dimensional experience. But writing this particular book, from my human perspective, was more of logging the entire experience into a tape recorder and then coming back and putting this into a Word document and working the text, the dialogue, if you will, from memory of what it was like being there, putting the words together, putting the ideas together, trying to create feeling as I'm delivering this message to the reader. But you were just mentioning about the voice of God. I absolutely know for a fact the voice of God does speak as your conscience.
In words or in thoughts?
I would bet that it would be different for each person. For me, it did show up in the form of words, in presence, not in the Moses burning bush way, with the deep voice and Keith, wake up. It was the idea of Keith, wake up, and it was said for me to hear. Some people it happens in the form of feeling. Some people it happens in the form of sight or psychic information. I think it's different from person to person, but I think it's also wise to not exclude all those ideas, because in the first segment that aired last week, I had mentioned that God is omnipresent. So what does that mean? It means it's everywhere all the time and there's nothing it is not except fear. Well, that being said, everything really is God's voice. There's nothing that is not happening that isn't God. It's
Now, why do
happening
you
all the
different?
time.
Now, when we talk about fear, as I see it, fear is the opposite of love, not hate. Hate's just a byproduct of fear.
Right.
So, you're saying that most of what you were getting from this was really to destroy fear, move fear away.
Move through it.
Move through it.
Move through would be, and I apologize if I wasn't clear on that. I think it's more of a moving through, because fear is your friend. It is God talking to you, literally saying, I want you to grow. And here is your ticket to that expansion. And believe it or not, most often it does not show up in the way we want that to happen. And therefore, we find ourselves humbled on our knees, or in some experience that we wish we didn't happen. But in hindsight, 2020, if I knew this, I could have avoided it. But often our growth happens through fear.
I've never thought of fear as being a friend. In fact, Jesus always said, "Fear not, fear not, fear not." Everything was it, and basically, fear from what? Free. He says, "You'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free." Free from what? Free from fear. It seemed to me that fear is the devil,
right?
Not the friend. I didn't. Can you expand on what you were saying about fear there a little bit?
When I was a child, I've always said you cannot go over fear. You cannot go around it, and you will likely not expand through whatever lesson through that fear unless you move through it. Mm-hmm. When I was a child, I remember being in a public swimming pool, and all my friends are racing to get to the top of the high diving board. And I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't make any sense to me. How is it they're having such passion and joy when I'm sitting here and holding on the side of the pool being so scared to death? Mm-hmm. And the more I chewed on that idea, the more it bothered me. Mm-hmm. So one day I said, today's the day. Took a big breath, swallowed my spit, walked up the high diving board. Now I have no choice but to move through the metaphorical fear of diving off this high diving board, because there's a line of kids behind me and they want up. Mm-hmm. The only way is down. And I'm going to the edge of the board. I'm going, oh, Jesus Christ. Please be with me and whatever, save my life.
You just step out.
1, 2, 3. And I jumped into my illusion, my fear. And when I hit the water, it was shattered, because I didn't die.
It didn't hurt.
Didn't hurt. In fact, I'm pushing kids out of the way now because I can get back up. So it's very analogous, because the fear in that scenario was a gift. And it was my perception of what I thought my fear was and what it was I was afraid about. That was blocking me from joy, bliss, expansion.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the downloading of this book, now you're walking around over there like this in the middle of 35,000 people and yammering on about what you're seeing. But you must have some of this download coming besides just the description of what you're seeing and your experience, right?
Absolutely. And while I'm dictating this into this tape recorder, how do you describe the weather changing in front of your face into a tape recorder? How do you do that? Mm-hmm. Besides, how do you find the words other than just, I'm speechless at most of these events that are transpiring in front of me while I'm on the ashram of this holy man. Mm-hmm. How do you describe having a conversation with a lady from Bosnia 5 minutes before, and all of a sudden, verbatim, literally, the exact same thing we're talking about begins to manifest as if she knew this. How do you find words for all this? So a lot of it was just basically using words to describe what I saw. The other half of writing the book was truly tapping into that part of myself that had the information that supported what I really couldn't describe in the first place. It was really about me digging inside and recalling the experience, the feelings of what it was like to be in India, the feelings that were passing through my body as I was doing my best to dictate.
Now I've got client authors that I've advised to use the tape recorder like that. And if you have problems writing that down, don't worry about grammar and syntax and punctuation, all that stuff. Get it down.
Yeah.
That's what you got a publisher for. They do all that. But in the case of you're taking this information down, and then at some point you got to sit down and write it. Right? At some point you got to put this on paper, right? And this must be the time when you receive that download, because you have a different perspective on what you've experienced 3 months before or 6 months before there. You have a different perspective on it now. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience on the actual process of getting that together with what you've recorded?
I think it's a very good word, is perspective, because when the miracles and experience was being had, I was receiving. Sitting down to write is delivering. And so your perspective has shifted from the head sides of the coin to the tail sides of the coin. And so now, instead of being filled, you begin to express. And so
that law of giving and receiving. Isn't it?
Yes. And so your intention,
in breath, out breath. Yeah.
Absolutely. And your intention is to sit there and express. And so by doing that, you know, as you said, it's not about syntax, it's not about grammar, it's not about punctuation. Write it out. Get it out. Just express all that's inside of you. The how-tos, what to do with it, that's not step one. That's step 4, 5, or 6. Step 1 is to bring out what's inside of you. Step 2 would probably be to somewhat categorize and meander what you've written into some unified idea to where everything is nice and congruent. Because if you want to write about fear, you put that in a chapter here. If you want to write about expansion or whatever it is, subject content you're writing about. But writing is really about being present. Yes, you have a paper and a pen or typewriter or computer nowadays in front of you. It's about being present, and it's not just a dialogue that's passing through your head. It's more of a task of being able to put in your feelings into words. There's a much broader scope that's happening just remembering a juicy limerick or lyric or phrase that sounds really cool if someone reads it, because beyond the words there's a powerful energy. My first editor, Stella Steele, God bless her, she's no longer here, and I miss her greatly. She says, Keith, when we were editing the first book, you've expressed the same idea quite a few times. She says, it's always been my idea to say that if you express something very well written once or twice, the amount of punch and power that comes off of that doesn't have to be repeated. In fact, it will never be forgotten. That taught me a lot.
Now, before you went to India, I mean, you're a musician, and as you said, you're looking at it. You were looking at that invitation. You were looking at that gift horse in the mouth and saying, "How am I going to do it?" Right? But an experience like that must have kind of made you a mystic overnight on a one trip when you see all those kind of things happening. Could you describe some of them for us, or one of them for us?
Yeah. Last week I mentioned the experience about being in the plane and saw the flight attendant coming to me down a dimly lit aisle with this avatar, divine man, superimposed, and he sat next to me. But when I got to India, again, I was watched over. I kid you not, I was watched over. And I'm resting on this concrete slab in this airport sleeping, only to find this Indian military man butting me with the end of his rifle, waking me up. Now that's a sight for you. Thinking, oh my God, what is about to happen? He was actually there to protect and serve. He says, I know where you're going. And I said, how did you know that? And he says, I've been watching people come through this airport for years. I know exactly where you're going. He says, and I don't want you to listen to anyone but me, and I will see to it that you catch the right transit.
Maybe all the Americans going over there look like deer in the headlights or something.
We're looking up like in New York. But there was just so many things that happened. For example, on the ashram, out of 35,000+ people, who wouldn't want to talk to Jesus? Who wouldn't want to talk to Buddha or your chosen deity in whatever form? So while there, everyone wants to literally have a one-on-one conversation with God, right? And it's called interviewitis. At least that's what I call it in the book. And as Sai Baba comes out and gives darshan, blessing.
Well, these are not newspaper type of people. They just want. These are just people who want some private time with Sai Baba.
With someone who knows everything about your life, where you're going, and how to get back home to heaven. Mm-hmm. And so as he's gracing the ashram with his blessing, he'll point to 10, 15 people. That means you get one-on-one time with God in his private room. Well, this lady, this will describe you some of the miracles and how these things orchestrate themselves. This lady was selected, so she thought, and she went up to the curtain to go in the room with the lucky ones. And they said, I'm sorry, you weren't selected. And I could see the life energy, her disappointment, just the life energy leaving, the disappointment settle in and begin to anchor. And I felt for her because I know what it'd be like for me to have that gift. About an hour later, among 35,000 people who were just meandering all around the ashram, I'm sitting here in the courtyard, and this lady comes up to me, and we strike up a conversation. And we start talking about how I could be so lucky to have an interview. She goes, oh, Saddam, which means I appreciate the divine in you. Saddam, you must let such foolish notions go. I said, but I would love an interview. I said, but you know what? I think you might be right. I saw a lady a little earlier who thought she was called in, and she wasn't, and my heart went out to her. She said, Saddam, that lady was me. So these types of manifestations were on full blast every day, all day long. There's just so many. You'd have to read the book to see the level of bliss I was able to play. By the way,
how are people able to get your book?
As for now, you can you can go to Amazon.com.
Now, we had information on there about on the screen before about your contact numbers and so forth, but I don't know if we had on there about how they could get the book. So,
sure, you can contact me on the number that you see on the screen, or you can go to keithanthonyblanchard.com. You'll see a picture of the book cover, which will take you to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. So Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you can look up Keith Anthony Blanchard and look up For the Love of God, A Spiritual Journey.
Right. So reading the book is not exactly like the 10th Insight or one of these travel books, but it does tell the story of the trip and events on the trip, right?
Absolutely.
And what is the major benefit one gets? You know, what's in it for me to read the book?
That's a good, honest question. And I'm kind of stumped that I would say, have to say, The insight is that my life is the example that your highest idea, be it called God, be it your job that you are passionate about, it is reachable. And the fact that I was able to touch, to use the word, infinity, not only in the form of a human being, but within myself, using this human being as the excuse to do that the unreachable is reachable. You have to want it. You have to want what you want as much as you breathe your breath every day. It has to be your breath. It's passion, it's drive, it's sincerity. You have to take this layer right here and peel it open and expose yourself and make yourself vulnerable to the miracle of what you see in your life that fills you full of bliss. And for me, it's passion, it's God.
Now, in your first book, which is a best-selling book, The Divine Principle Anchoring Heaven and Earth, you're talking about certain principles, universal laws, as you've come to understand them, right? And that one can follow pretty easily. What does one look for in this book for any guidance, or is this about guidance?
It is about guidance, but I think, and now to answer your question a little more concretely that you posed just a minute ago, what is in it for the person? People who know me, and this is my bragging point, I'm a real dude. I'm very sincere about what I say. I don't bull anybody. Well, I do, but that's intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I think you will see my honesty. And in that honesty, in reading this book, they'll develop a relationship of trust. And in that trust, I think people will become open to receive what I have received on this trip to India for 2 weeks. Therefore, you're going to receive... In fact, Jim, I wrote, even though this happened so long ago, and I was still writing this book in the last few years, which this book took me 15 years, I wrote everything about India in present tense. So the person, the reader, can actually absorb what's happening to me as it's happening versus telling them a past story. So I think what they're going to get from the book is that I actually believe, emphatically believe, what happened to me, and transfer that to them, that their life is deserving of those kinds of ideas as well.
For the benefit of those of you who are writing a book or journaling or thinking about it, I created a catalog, a Renford Books catalog. I have 15 books, and I put those in one catalog. And in it, I had a section with the specifics, the details, the number of pages, and all that stuff. And then I had a description, a summary of what the book is about. And then I moved down to bullet points as what's in it for me. I asked myself, for the reader, what am I going to get out of reading this book? What's in it for me? And the reason is so many people really have that in their head, whether they know it or not. They're thinking, what am I going to get out of it? What's in it for me? So I didn't ask that question in order to put you on the spot.
Oh, sure.
It's just, I think it's something that each author needs to think about. I mean, think about it. Why should anybody read this book? What's the benefit? And I think you did a good job of answering what the benefit is.
Now that you explained it that way, I hear the question from a different perspective. What they will get from reading this book, it's a good read. It's a fun read. You'll get expansion from it. You'll get a new way of seeing things, an absolute new way of seeing things. Your belief system in magic, miracles, those things that are just makes life here on earth somewhat easier. It's not that life here on earth is hard.
It is for some folks.
Yeah, look out and about. Sometimes, the growth spurts in life happen through those fears, through those difficulties, through those challenges.
That's when we
that
learn,
make
isn't
us
it?
strong. Yeah.
It's when we learn is in those
Absolutely.
challenges.
Yeah.
Well, even a novel, I get a lot. I read very few novels because it takes me so much time reading other things in my research and what I'm doing. So I read very few. But when I do, I generally get a lot more out of it than I, thought.
Yeah.
And then when you can, and I think it's the personal experience that's going to be the most important. But still, you can get a lot from somebody. I mean, I know now from taking that trip to northern India, to Rajasthan, you get a real feel for it. And hopefully in the book they can get a real feel of what it was like to be in a place with 35 to 100,000 people are coming to here, and just to hear
For one purpose.
person.
For one
Person.
one reason whatsoever. And though it may look like they're going there for the avatar, for the man, that's just a facade. They're going for themselves. They're going there for love. They're going there to unify. What one particular Indian master says, people are not going to the soccer game because of the ball. They're going there because of the unification that is happening. You know, it's not necessarily about Satya Sai Baba. He was the excuse that helps me to become a better human being. For some people, it's Jesus Christ. For some people, it's Buddha. For some people, it's Muhammad. So these people who have paved the way, that's really what they did. I am the way. You know, follow me, and I will lead you to the spiritual
lead
supermarket.
you to find yourself.
Find yourself.
In the last, we've got about 2 minutes on the showtime. Is there anything specific you'd like to tell our audience about the book, and be sure and tell them where again, how to get it, and any little message you'd like to leave here for us?
This book took me 15 years. 15 years of diligence, sincerity, passion. I would sit there for hours a day in meditation, remembering, feeling, being, and processing, and putting all this together. Is for my love for God. But most importantly in my life, not only my love for God, meaning a higher deity or something that exists inside of me, is because people are my passion. I love empowering people with knowledge, wisdom, information. And if someone read this book and had one paragraph, grab them. That 15 years was worth it for me. And someone may say, oh, come on now, Keith. You mean you had actually worked 15 years for one paragraph? This is beyond the paragraph. My gift is not the paragraph. The gift is my dedication. I love helping people. My goal, my journey, my mission is doing what I can in this lifetime to unify all people from all faiths, from every color.
It's been great having you on the show for a second time. I mean, we've had you on here before, but congratulations on this new book.
Thank you.
And you have the information on the screen about how to get the book. And if you would like to talk to Keith, you can do so, or you can email me, iamrenford@gmail.com, either one, and I'll get that information to them. Be with us next week for another edition of The Bookman Show.